A few weeks ago we did a video on a budget two-door build with a 5.3 LMG in a white 2011 Sport. This is pretty much the opposite of that. This is a white two-door Rubicon, fully optioned out. It's got the hard rock hood, obviously the locker sway bar, LS3 430 horsepower engine, Pentastar fan, dual pass 52 millimeter aluminum radiator. It's got all the whistles and bells, and it's an awesome Jeep. And it just goes to show the diversity of the LS series of engines. That 5.3 ran great. Iron block, small radiator, stock transfer case, and that build was very affordable. This build, on the other hand, is still an excellent value. If you consider that Hemis are pushing $30,000 to get the same performance we're getting from these LS3s, this swap costs significantly less, will outperform the Hemi in most ways as far as cooling and handling because of the weight, size. The way these run with a 6-speed automatic transmission is perfect in my opinion. The 8 speeds are coming out, but I still feel that these 6 speeds have a long way to go. I really like this combination. It's an excellent combination. It's reliable. They're about as rationalized as you can get in a JK swap right now, in my opinion. And on that thread, let's talk about where things are going. As you know, we have our billet brackets out. As you know, we are using OEGM harnesses with full power distribution, ground distribution, diagnostics, redundancies, safety backups, protection modes, oil protection, oil aeration, coolant temp protection, all that. And that's what keeps these engines not only safe but running in the long term. It's one thing to get an extra 50 horsepower and make your engine run for 50,000 miles, but it's another thing to own your JK for 10 years and put 200,000 trouble-free miles on it. So that's kind of the goal. Now, most of you know that the harness and the billet brackets have been work in progress for over 8 years with us, and I think we've pretty much got those to a point where they're not going to get much better. We can't reduce the circuit count. We can't, there's just no getting around simplifying it without losing something. Can it be simplified? Oh yes, of course. And we could put a hot rod harness in it, but that's just not where we're going to go, because we want the same OE functionality that the manufacturer demands, and that's the way we're going to do it. Now, as far as interfacing the Jeep with the GM electronics, there's many ways we can do that, and we have been working on that for 8 years. And I'm going to say at this point, I feel the way we've been doing this is the most reliable way. Having two operating systems completely independent of each other with a small bridge means you have not only the purity of the calibration, but the isolation, which means the calibration can do what it's meant to do by the manufacturer without having any corruption put into it. And the discrete integration, in my opinion, is still the best. And when it comes to failure modes, you could literally remove our bridge and the engine would still run. You would drive home. This particular Jeep, this is a 13 or 14, I think, and this has our MoTech, our Generation 4 MoTech module installed. We have full automatic air conditioning control. We have pretty much full functionality of everything in the interior. We do not have the 654321 on this, although we could install our CAN interface and get that. This module does have the CAN interface inside of it, and we can support the Prindle on the dash. But here's the thing. When it comes to CAN interface, once you break into a CAN network, a lot of things can happen, good and bad. Most of us have experience with, or many of us have experience with some of the CAN interfaces like the lockpicks and the 410s, and I've been working with them for years. And once you inject those into the CAN network, they can unlock your radio for navigation. They can activate remote start and other factory functions. And if it works perfectly, then the world's wonderful and you have no issues. If it doesn't work perfectly, I think we all know what a nightmare the CAN interface can be. So we're kind of at that point, and I've been doing testing both on our and other CAN interfaces that are out there, and I can just tell you that I still have a higher confidence in our discrete setup. Our discrete setup's been out for 8 years. I have been in the middle of nowhere with our discrete setup, and I have full confidence that these networks are pure. My fear is if the CAN interface goes down, or if the CAN interface were to get corrupted, we need to have a proper redundant safety backup so everything works as intended. And we're going to get there. In fact, our first CAN interfaces that are now in operation have limited their use to basic things like Prindle driving and air conditioning inputs and outputs. And don't be fooled. Full CAN integration is not as easy as you would think. A lot of these signals are simply pulled in from the CAN and then put out discreetly, or put out by the CAN and pulled in discreetly. So to pull into the CAN and put out of the CAN is doable, and yes, we are doing that. We're actually doing that with the gear selector right now and the cruise control and some other things. What it's really come down to, though, is it has to make me happy. It has to prove to me that it is reliable, that if there were a failure, if the CAN interface were removed, I need to be assured that that vehicle is going to continue to run and drive and get you home. This is very important to me. So while we are integrating CAN on a lower level, I do not feel at this point in time going too far with the CAN is wise. We have the functionality, the reliability, the history, when I say history, we have 8 years of experience with this discrete integration, and we know how it reacts. We know what the failure modes are. We know how to diagnose it easily. With the CAN interfaces installed in these Jeeps, some weird things start happening with lights and wipers and starting systems and security systems. You guys don't see that, but in the background we do. And we're not just testing our CAN module, we are testing our competitors, and we are testing other CAN interfaces that are not necessarily meant specifically for engine swaps, but to integrate things like radios and wireless modules and things like that. So we're on top of it, and we've actually been working on the CAN since 2013, and we have CAN interfaces now in vehicles operating. What we want to avoid is trying to rely on the CAN and other shortcuts to make the JK swap maybe more easier to install and cheaper. Let's just face it, you start eliminating parts, it's going to be less expensive. We want to maintain the functionality, and I want to maybe make a comparison to AEV here. AEV, I've been working with AEV since 2007, 2006. I've done a lot of Hemi work with them, and as you know, most of you know, AEV is married to Chrysler Mopar, and they strive to keep an OE level of functionality and reliability in their swaps. Now, maybe their swaps are less powerful than their competitors. Maybe their swaps don't have some of the aluminum bottles and air intake boxes that are aluminum, and you know, they basically strive for an OE level of functionality, and that's what we're striving for also. So what you end up getting in the end is a more reliable product that can be serviced by a dealership. Now, if we have a CAN interface installed, and let's say you're having an issue with the Prindle, there's one of my competitors that's actually putting an LS into a Chrysler operating system, and can you imagine if you took it to a GM dealer or a Chrysler dealer and tried to have that diagnosed? The calibrations aren't going to make sense, the hardware's not going to make sense, the wiring's not going to make sense, there is no schematics. And this is what I'm saying. You can pull up a 2011 Silverado 5.3 wiring diagram and diagnose your vehicle using factory charts, factory tools, GM technical information system, service programming. It's all going to apply. You try doing that with a hot rod style harness or a hacked calibration. Dealers aren't not going to want to work on that level, and you can literally take one of our Jeeps to a dealership and have them diagnose it as if it was the donor vehicle. So they can, and they have, hook up their scanners, their OE scanners, and diagnose these networks exactly as if they were original. They can reflash the BCM, they can reflash the excuse me, the TCM right at a dealer level.